University students around the country are complaining that police are using unnecessary force when dealing with protests. The Con online magazine editor Naren Tulsi has previously written about public order policing, particularly after the Marikana massacre. He joins us now in studio to discuss this. Naren, welcome to you.
Thank you.
Very good to have you this afternoon. You've covered the Marikana killings extensively. You were carefully watching police methods at that time. You've also watched police conduct during the FISMAS 4 protests in recent days. How different to you is the SAPS approach in both those instances?
Not particularly different. I mean, there's certainly, there are two, I think perhaps let's start by looking at two very specific points of the Standing Order 262, which is what police are guided by when it comes to public order control. And the first one, I think is, especially when it comes to spontaneous outbursts, for example, as happened yesterday at Rhodes University. This is not an organized march where municipalities are notified. It's a spontaneous incident. And the police are, Standing Order 262 is pretty insistent that in these instances the police must attempt to create an atmosphere which is conducive to negotiations by refraining from displaying, by the display of aggression, for example, brandishing weapons. We saw that yesterday at Rhodes University, as you can see on the footage. Police wandering around with weapons, shooting sort of without any sort of shooting willy-nilly into the campus. And the second one is that they need to set the highest standards of tolerance and do not use any firearms against demonstrators except in the case of private defense and where lives are in serious danger. As you can see in that instance, there are no lives in any sort of danger. Yet police are shooting rubber bullets. They're shooting rubber bullets again against prescripts which require them to shoot into the ground. They're shooting into the air, and they're shooting at above waist level. They're shooting at students who in that incident were standing on walls. So I mean, there seems to be no training going on with regard to public order policing in this country, despite sort of, refresher courses being rolled out for public order policemen specifically. With regard to sort of the general policing and and policemen in other units who appear on these scenes, there doesn't seem to be much going on, no.
I want to ask you this because people have watched that footage and they've seen students hurl missiles at people. There's apparently one scene where one of the officers says, "Put down that bottle," or "Don't throw that rock." So the implication of that is students are coming at them with some sort of weapon, primitive though.
In that footage that I saw, I didn't see a single student attacking a policeman. The policeman shouts out, "Put down that bottle," to somebody in the far distance, while his gun is pointed at that person. I didn't see any footage. I didn't see any incidents of student violence. I mean, this is what is reprehensible about that particular incident.
Let me just ask you more generally. It seems as well police are quite wound up in that. I mean, you listen to what the female police officer on the ground says. You know, we're trying to protect you, but they're quite nervous themselves and quite wound up. Do you have the sense that they don't know how to behave in these situations?
Well, certainly, because there's a list of protocol that one has to observe and go through. For example, set up a temporary jock in those sort of instances. There's report back sessions. There should be debriefing sessions, and one has to sort of wonder whether the police as an institution as a whole, cognizant of the fact that we've had student protests from last year, that we've had protests around on the streets by ordinary citizens, which I think the mainstream media call service delivery protests, which are a lot more nuanced than that, which happen all the time. Yet there seems to be no pure political or bureaucratic will to actually transform the police service firstly, and secondly to sort of equip the policemen with the necessary tools to deal with policing in a more holistic manner, which is a service as opposed to a force. I mean, this is apparent since since this fees must fall movement has emerged.
There were a number of recommendations made by the Farlam Commission. Have any of those been implemented?
Well, look, Minister Nhleko announced earlier this year that he'd set up a ministerial task team to look into the recommendations. This was in March last year. This was re-emphasized on the 4th anniversary of the Marikana massacre, where 34 people were killed on August 16th. You'll remember 10 people were killed in the days before. Jeff Radebe re-emphasized that this task team has been set up. What concrete has been done on the ground? It would appear not a lot. I think Minister Nhleko mentioned in Parliament earlier this year that they had bought, that they invested in radio equipment. But when it comes to actual training, I think that's where the deficiency lies. And you must realize, like if you look at Marikana, a lot of the policemen who were in positions of authority there, black or white, they had sort of cut their teeth in the apartheid era policing, which comes with a measure of violence. And these guys are still operating at managerial leadership levels in the SAPS. What that suggests about sort of how far we've transformed our police service is that it hasn't been very far. It's millimeters rather than the kilometers that we would have hoped for 20 years after sort of, democracy.
Well, Noreen, I'm really running out of time, so I'll press you for a quick answer here, please. The UJ footage of private security personnel. Yeah. How much does that muddy the waters when you've got private security as well as the SAPs?
Yeah, it certainly does, but it also points to, I think, sort of a country sort of where where the fires are really heated up, and one has to ask why this is so. Why are our emotions so raw? Why are we acting in a particular way? And I mean, in some instances, I think we have to come back to sort of the paralysis of our state, the fact that sort of ministers are not held accountable, not doing their jobs, that it seems that sort of the trickle-down effect of sort of the Zuma administration is that sort of that the rule of law does not work anymore for people. It would appear, because I mean, if the president is continuously challenging the rule of law in courts through his lawfare, we see ministers doing that. We see Mr. Schlaudi doing that as well. Sort of. I mean, it's a crazy situation where the rule of law, aside from where the courts operate, seem to be sort of being pushed to the periphery, and it's pretty much sort of the wild, wild west a lot of the time.
That's very worrying indeed. And Noreen Tulsi, thanks very much for your insight into that story. Good to have you with us. He is the Con magazine editor.